when 7-year-old Emma walked into the county shelter and pointed at the dog in the last cage. The one who hadn't made a sound in 3 years. The volunteer's face went pale. "Sweetheart," she signed gently, her hands moving with practiced concern, "that one's complicated." But Emma's small hand was already reaching toward the glass, her dark eyes fixed on the motionless German Shepherd mix sitting in shadow, and something in that moment made everyone freeze. Because Emma couldn't hear. And the dog had never barked. His name was Ghost. Not because he was white. His coat was the color of smoke and steel, mottled with old scars that told stories no one wanted to read. They called him Ghost because he moved through the shelter like something that wasn't quite there. Silent. Withdrawn. A living shadow that ate mechanically, walked when led, and returned to the back corner of his kennel where he would sit, motionless, staring at nothing. The staff whispered about him during lunch breaks. Found him chained in a basement. 3 years old. Vocal cords looked fine, but never heard him whimper. Not even at the vet. It's like he forgot how to make noise. Or chose not to. In the fluorescent lights of the shelter, Ghost's eyes were amber and distant. Windows to rooms that had been locked from the inside. Other dogs barked and howled for attention, their voices echoing off concrete walls in desperate symphony. Ghost just watched. Silent. Always silent. The label on his cage read, "Special needs, behavioral assessment required." In shelter language, that meant, "We don't know what to do with him." Adoption applications came and went. Families looked. Couples considered. Singles paused. But no one took the dog who couldn't bark. Emma Rodriguez was born into silence. At 7 years old, she knew the weight of words she'd never hear. The sound of her mother's laughter, birds in the morning, music everyone said was beautiful. She read lips with fierce concentration and signed with hands that moved like birds in flight, but in a world built on sound, she often felt like she was watching life through glass. Her parents brought her to the shelter on a Saturday morning in late autumn. The light was golden and slanted, catching dust motes in its beams. "You can choose any dog you want, sweetheart," her father signed, his smile warm but his eyes carrying that familiar weight. The worry that never quite left since the day the doctors confirmed their daughter would never hear. Emma walked slowly past the kennels. Dogs jumped. Dogs spun. Dogs pressed wet noses against chain link, tails whipping with hope. She looked at each one carefully. Then she stopped. The last kennel. The one in shadow. The dog that sat perfectly still, watching her with eyes that looked, like hers felt. Like someone who understood that the world was loud, but some things were better said in silence. "That one," she signed. The volunteer. Sarah, her name tag read. Crouched down to Emma's level, her face kind but firm. "Emma, honey, that dog, he's different. He doesn't play. He doesn't bark. He barely reacts to anything. We're not even sure he'd be good with." But Emma was already moving closer, her small fingers wrapping around the chain link fence. Ghost didn't move. Didn't approach. Just sat there in the shadow, amber eyes locked on this small human who stared back without fear, without expectation. Emma's mother touched Sarah's shoulder. "She's deaf," she said softly, then signed the words as she spoke to them. Maybe that's why." Sarah's breath caught. She looked from the silent girl to the silent dog. The shelter suddenly felt very still. "Let me at least go in first," Sarah said, signing as she spoke. "To make sure it's safe." She unlocked the kennel with shaking hands. The metal door creaked. Ghost's ears twitched. The first movement he'd made. Sarah stepped inside carefully, reading his body language the way she'd been trained. Tense. Uncertain. But not aggressive. She waved Emma in slowly. Emma entered without hesitation. Her parents stood at the kennel door, her mother's hand over her mouth, her father's jaw tight. Emma walked forward. 3 steps, 4. Until she was 5 feet from Ghost. Then she did something no one expected. She sat down. Cross-legged on the cold concrete floor, her hands folded in her lap, patient and still as stone. The shelter seemed to hold its breath. Minutes passed. Long, impossible minutes where nothing happened. Then Emma lifted her hands and began to sign. Not to anyone in particular. Not to Ghost, exactly. Just into the space between them. Her father, watching from outside, translated in a whisper. "I don't hear things. Everyone talks, but I don't hear it. Sometimes I feel alone even when people are close." Her small hands moved with the grace of someone much older. "People try to be nice, but they don't understand. They talk louder, like that will help. They forget I can see them. I can feel them. I just can't hear them." Ghost's ears shifted. Forward. Listening to something beyond sound. "My mom says I'm brave, but I'm scared sometimes. Scared that I'll always be different. That I'll never really belong." Emma's eyes began to glisten. "But when I saw you, you looked like me. like someone who doesn't need noise to understand. She lowered her hands into her lap. And then she did something that made Sarah's heart stop. She extended one small hand toward Ghost. Palm up. Open. Waiting. The dog's eyes fixed on that hand. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Then, slowly. So slowly it looked like time itself was bending. Ghost stood. One paw forward. Then another. His massive head lowered, scarred ears flat against his skull, amber eyes never leaving Emma's face. He crossed the distance between them. And pressed his nose into her palm. Emma's father made a sound. Something between a laugh and a sob. Ghost held the contact for a moment, then something shifted in his expression. His eyes softened. The tension in his shoulders released like a sigh made visible. And he sat down beside her. Not touching. Not leaning. Just there. In her silence. In the space where words didn't matter. Emma's hand moved slowly to Ghost's head. Her fingers found the space between his ears and rested there, gentle as falling leaves. Ghost closed his eyes. In that moment, under the harsh fluorescent lights of a county animal shelter, two beings who lived in silence found something louder than any sound could ever be. Connection. Understanding. Home. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Emma's mother was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. Her father had his hand over his heart. Emma looked up at them and signed 4 words. "This is my dog." Ghost leaned into her touch. Just slightly, just enough. And for the first time since he'd arrived at the shelter, he looked peaceful. The papers were signed within an hour. Emma insisted on walking Ghost out on the leash herself, her small hand gripping the worn leather, her face radiating pure joy. 3 months later, on a Sunday morning filled with winterlight, something happened that no one could explain. Emma was in the backyard, throwing a ball that Ghost would retrieve with patient, silent devotion. Her parents watched from the kitchen window, marveling as they did every day at the bond that had formed. Ghost, who slept beside Emma's bed, who waited by the door when she was at school, who had learned to respond to her hand signals with the focus of a scholar. Then a car backfired in the street. Emma didn't hear it, of course. But a neighbor's dog had gotten loose and was running. Running straight toward Emma, aggressive and territorial, teeth bared. And Ghost saw. For 3 years, he had been silent. For 3 years, not a sound had passed his lips. But in that moment, as danger approached the small human who had seen him when everyone else saw only a problem to solve, Ghost barked. Not a small sound. Not a whimper or a test. A thunderous, protective, alive sound that shook the morning air. The neighbor's dog stopped dead. Ghost placed himself between Emma and the threat, and barked again. Primal, fierce, and full of purpose. Emma's father sprinted outside. The neighbor came running. The loose dog was secured, apologies given, disaster averted. But Emma's parents stood in their yard, tears streaming down their faces, watching as their daughter wrapped her arms around Ghost's neck, unable to hear the miracle that had just occurred but feeling it in the way his whole body vibrated, in the protective stance he held, in the way he had found his voice to save hers. The vet later said there was no physical reason Ghost had been silent. No damage. No explanation. Sometimes, the vet said quietly, animals hold their pain so deep that they forget they have a voice. Until something matters enough to bring it back. The day Emma met Ghost was the day 2 silent souls learned that love doesn't need sound to speak. And the day Ghost barked was the day he proved that miracles don't announce themselves. They wait quietly until the moment someone needs them most.